Yeah. He said, it's what the email said. The impact of use the cricket during slice and oh, I did do that typo. Oops.
Every day we ask so many questions. What should I wear? What's the weather going to be like? How am I going to fit everything in? But then there are those bigger questions, like why am I here? Where am I heading? Is there more to life than this?
I had arrived at an answer to the most important issue that we humans ever deal with. Is there a God? And I had arrived there without ever really looking at the evidence. And I was supposed to be a scientist.
At 28, I had gotten many of the things that I thought I wanted. My girlfriend was on the cover of magazines, I had a Beamer, and I was so unhappy. It was a realization maybe that I would never find happiness where I was looking for it.
I think for so many years, I always just strived to be strong in myself. All I needed was me and my buddies and, we'd be like invincible. But the truth is, none of us are.
I found purpose, I found meaning, I found hope. God took something so broken and made it a beautiful art piece.
Alpha is a place where you can be yourself. You can say what you think and challenge everything. No question is too complex or too simple. And what your point of view is as important as anyone else's.
We are going on a journey together, an adventure to explore the questions of life, faith, and meaning.
Good morning and welcome to the New Life Church Letchworth live stream. My name's Sam and it's a real pleasure to introduce our morning I hope wherever you're watching from that you're well. Maybe like me, you've got your coffee or cup of tea to hand. Maybe you're just starting your breakfast. But I really just encourage you just to try and put those things to one side and really just engage this morning. It's not just something to have on in the background. You can say hello in the chat and participate as we go through our morning together. If it's your first time joining us, an extra special welcome. You can find more information about New Life Church on our website, nlcletchworth.co.uk. And I really encourage you to take a look through our YouTube channel, where there's loads of great content on there from the past year. And not to be missed is our amazing Superstars content for families and younger children. And just a reminder, that goes live every Sunday at 9:30. I know our household love getting ready for that to start and joining in with that. So really encourage you to go and watch those. If you haven't seen this morning's, then catch up with that later on today. It's a real pleasure to be together this morning, and we'll be hoping to share more details when we can meet in person, but we're really pleased that we have this opportunity to broadcast and to virtually meet together. There'll be a real fantastic opportunity again after the live stream this morning to meet, or at least virtually meet face to face on Zoom in the foyer, and I'll give you the Zoom details later on this morning. But really encourage you to get along and just have half an hour to chat and connect with people after the live stream. Joel's going to be carrying on our theme of AFTERSHOCK this morning, so here's a little taster.
Good morning. It is absolutely great to be together. If we haven't yet met, my name is Joel, and it's really a pleasure and a joy to be together. I don't know if you've heard this phrase, the shot heard round the world. For me, growing up, that was something that we learned about in history. And that line is from a poem, and it's called the Concord Hymn, and it was written by a guy named Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, it's actually refers to a moment in time where at a battle on a bridge in 1775, where some American soldiers, actually farmers, stood their ground against some of the British soldiers. And it was the first organized resistance to the British occupation. And it was here that the first British soldiers fell in battle, and it was there that they first retreated. And so the American Revolution started at this moment. And it was forever immortalized in a poem. And in the line of that poem, it says, "The shot heard round the world." And this skirmish was essentially the start of it. Now, there are moments throughout history where there's an event that happens which has repercussions for generations. And more recently, we've experienced events like this ourselves. You know, you might remember the assassination of Martin Luther King, maybe JFK. You might remember the events of 9/11. Or maybe the thing that you remember the most due to your age is the murder of George Floyd. Now, these are modern events which send aftershocks. They send waves through all of society and through the world. And that's like what an earthquake does. You know, after an earthquake, there are aftershocks. It's the repercussion that follows after the main shock. Now, the life of Jesus is one such moment with lasting repercussions. However, the aftershock of Jesus, it's not because he lived and was here on earth. And the aftershock actually isn't either because he died. See, Jesus' life is significant in time only because he came back to life. And that's what's shocking. See, dead men usually stay dead. And I don't know your perception or your thoughts or how you even think about the person of Jesus. You know, maybe you think he was a kind man who taught moral lessons like look out for the poor and take care of the disadvantaged. Or maybe he's kind of an early well-being sort of type of guru. Or maybe you think of Jesus as some kind of political revolutionary. He upended the religious and political systems and he hated injustice. Maybe you think Jesus was just crazy and he had some sort of Messiah complex. Maybe you think Jesus was a manipulative liar and his followers were so brainwashed that they created a fabrication to keep the lies going. And they were so passionate about maintaining this deceit that they actually all were willing to die for it. You know, whatever the truth is or whatever your perception is, if Jesus had just lived and died, he should have been forgotten a long time ago. Jesus should have been forgotten. You see, at the time of Jesus, the Roman Empire was the global power of the ancient world. Now, their power stretched from England to Africa, Syria to Spain, and 1 in 4 people lived under Roman rule. You know, it was a phenomenal accomplishment. The civilization, the art, the architecture, the politics, it was a machine that could be beautiful and brilliant. And there are numerous examples of their military might, but there are also numerous examples of their incredible cruelty. By contrast, Jesus was a nobody from a nowhere on the edge of the farthest corner of the Roman Empire. You know, his place of birth was unimportant and unimpressive. In first century Judea, no one was shocked that there was a religious zealot with a group of followers. Historical records account various religious zealots from this part of the world, and even at that time, this part of the Roman Empire. It wasn't a shock that he had followers. Most religious leaders do. It also wasn't a shock that he was brutally put to death. That was the way of the Romans. You know, historical documents, not from the Bible, historical documents record that Pontius Pilate, who was the same Roman governor who gave the order for Jesus' execution, was later himself ordered back to Rome to stand trial for cruelty and oppression. And the charge that he was brought back to Rome on was that he had executed a group of people without proper trial. Roman authorities expected that this whole thing with Jesus was just going to go the same way as every other uprising that they'd ever dealt with. They would stamp it out, squash it, it would be done, it would be over. The Romans thought it was over. Jesus' friends and followers thought it was over. Jesus had been crucified. He'd been put to death. His followers scarpered. They went into hiding. And the Great Revolution was over. The leader is dead. Followers dispersed. Movement over. Except it wasn't over. Why? Because Jesus didn't stay dead. He came back to life, and this changed everything. If Jesus did not come back from the dead, then this would have just been another movement in history where somebody gathered a band of followers only for it to fade away when the charismatic leader is dead or killed. Except Jesus came back to life. This caused his followers to rethink everything. Their perspectives had to change. Things that they had done in certain ways for thousands of years had to now change. Easter is the one day that affects every day. Easter is the earthquake, and we are still feeling the aftershocks today. See, every religion has sacred places where special people require specific performances. Sacred places such as tabernacles or temples, churches, mosques, synagogues, and they're filled with special relics, and they're places where special people, such as priests or imams, shamans, they're the chosen ones. And these, almost always men, require specific performances from you to appease your God. And those who performed these tasks the best or the most accurate were regarded as the most spiritual, the devout, the most holy, the most faithful. The more that you perform, the more holy that you are. Now that's a very simple summary of religion, but all religions have that in common. Sacred places where special people require specific performances. Today, we're going to look at the idea of special people. Last week we looked at sacred places, and if you missed it, you can catch it online. It's there available for you here on our YouTube channel. But I'm so glad that you're joining us today, because no matter what your faith experience or your perception or what do you even think about Jesus, we're actually talking about something that is universal. It's important for all of us. And it's that question, like, how do we actually draw near to God? At the time of Jesus, if you wanted to get close to God, you had to go through the priest. No one could approach God on their own merits. You were not worthy enough. You were not holy enough. You had to follow the proper channels. You needed someone to approach God on your behalf. Someone special who was set apart and chosen to do the things of God. You needed someone special to offer your sacrifices for you. And those special people were called the priests. Like everything that's set apart as more special than others, you have to have criteria to determine your status. Now, thankfully, we have a list of what it took for you to be classed as one of those special people. Now, by the time Jesus was born, Israel already had a long established institution. They had been operating this priesthood for over 1,500 years. That's a long time for any organization or any institution to keep maintaining what they're doing and continue to do it in the same way. That's a pretty incredible length of time. Now, they had very clear rules that set out what it was for you to be one of the special people. Here's the list. For example, you had to be born from the right family. You had to have the correct genealogy. You had to be a descendant of Aaron, and you had to be able to prove it. Now, Aaron was Moses' brother. If you've heard of Moses before, Moses was the guy that delivered the Jewish people when they were slaves in Egypt and they went through the desert, and his brother was Aaron. You had to trace your family history all the way back to prove that you were in the line of Aaron. Now, you were born into this. You didn't qualify for it through your training. There wasn't a vote taken. You qualified through your birth. You're not elected. You couldn't choose to be one or not. You either automatically qualified on the basis of your birth. You were either in or out. Now, you also had to be male. At that time, your gender qualified or disqualified you. You had to also be between the ages of 30 and 50. You also had to be unblemished. You were not allowed to be lame or blind. You couldn't be disfigured or deformed in any way. If you were married, there were rules about your marriage, who you married, and the circumstances of it. For example, you couldn't be married to a harlot. You were not allowed to marry a woman who was divorced. You were not allowed to marry a widow unless she had first been married to a priest. And you had to marry a virgin from your own people. You also had to have no uncleanness, such as leprosy or other skin conditions. You had to have an untrimmed beard with well-trimmed but not shaved hair. And you had to wear certain types of clothes. Now, that's the full list. So now we know what it takes to be qualified as one of the special people. This was the way things were done when Jesus was born. When he was born on this earth, this is the way things had always been done. It was the way things were, and it was the way things were always going to be. Now, this idea of specific criteria, it's not exclusive to ancient Judaism. All religions have certain criteria to determine who the special people are. That's universal. Now, if you're hearing this and I'm reading through that list and you're feeling a little bit offended, well, good. Because it is actually offensive now. It's not the way things are supposed to be done anymore. Jesus coming to earth and healing and teaching people, it was great. However, that in and of itself wasn't the reason that everything changed. Everything changed because Jesus came back to life. Now, think of it like this. Imagine that you had met all of those criteria and you were actually one of the special people. And you served in this role and you did it to the best of your ability. But guess what? You're not able to be a priest forever. You'll reach an age where you're too old to serve, and you also could die while you're in service. So you can't be the priest forever. In fact, no one could be the priest forever. It would always pass on to the next special person who met all the criteria, and then they would do the job until they became too old or died. And then this would keep going on and on and on, just like it had done for the last 1,500 years. But all of this changed. Everything changed because of Jesus. There's this book that we have in the collection of books which makes up the Bible. The Bible is 66 different books that are put together. And one of the books in the Bible, it's in the New Testament, is called Hebrews. And it was written to the Jewish people. And that book was only written 30 years after Jesus' time on earth. And it was written to Jewish people. And it's talking about how things are different now that Jesus is here, when he came, the traditions and all these things that they had done for as long as they remember. And this author writes this book of Hebrews to these Jewish people who know this culture because this is what they've always done and the way that it's always being done. And the author writes about the priests. In Hebrews chapter 7, he or she writes this: there have been many priests because each one dies and needs to be replaced. But because Jesus lives forever, he is a permanent priest. Therefore, he is able to completely save all of those who come to God through him, because he always lives to speak up for them. You see, if Jesus didn't come back from the dead, there would be no permanent, lives forever priest. If Jesus didn't come back from the dead, there would be nobody to always speak up for you, to speak up for them. You see, their perception changed on the basis that Jesus came back from the dead. Jesus' resurrection changed the way everything had been done. The author carries on writing, and it says this, it says, we now have a high priest who meets all the criteria, one who is holy, blameless, set apart, and with authority. Unlike all the other priests, he does not need to keep offering sacrifices day after day for his own sins and then also for the sins of others. No, he's done it once and for all when he offered up himself as the sacrifice. You see, Jesus' death on the cross and then coming back to life destroyed, abolished, obliterated, finished, completed, brought to an end, stopped the old way of doing religion. Within 30 years of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, 1,500 years of tradition changed. They were made redundant. And that only happens if Jesus comes back to life. Otherwise, he's just a nobody from a nowhere place in the world who's got some charismatic personality that drags followers along with him. But something happened because Jesus came back to life. And of course, the religious leaders at the time hated this. Because special people like to have all the power. You know that's true. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you know that's true. It's universal. It's a human condition. But Easter changed all of this. Jesus dying and coming back to life destroyed the old way of doing things, and he brought in a totally brand new way of doing things. Instead of having to go through special people, Jesus destroyed that way for all to be able to come near to God. And he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the once and for all time priest who gave his life as the once and for all time sacrifice to open the doors once for all to be able to come near to God with boldness. That means you can come near to God without being afraid. You don't have to be afraid of God. Instead of judging one another and holding each other up to lists and trying to figure out who's more qualified or capable or welcome, instead of measuring one another to see who's the most holy or special or faithful or devout, there became a whole new way of living and loving, a whole new way of treating one another. Jesus has made a way for you to enter into a relationship with him, and you can have this friendship with him directly. Not only that, but all of us who count ourselves as Jesus followers are given the same mandate and the same authority, the same permission as his representatives to tell others about Jesus. You know, Jesus had a group of followers, and one of his followers was a guy named Peter. And listen to what Peter said at the end of his life. And this is about 35 years after Jesus. This is in 68 AD when Peter's letter was written. And he's writing this to encourage people at the end of his life. And Peter says this to people: you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, chosen to do his work and speak out for him. Chosen to tell others of the night and day difference that Jesus has made in your life. From rejected to accepted. From an outsider to an insider. From nothing to something. I mean, how can we be the chosen people or the royal priesthood? You know, we're not royalty. We saw the funeral yesterday, where Prince Philip's funeral, and my word, like, I'm not one of those people. I was not invited. I'm not royalty. I can't trace my family line, my lineage. You know, how are we chosen people, royal priesthood, a holy nation chosen to do his work and speak out? See, this changed everything. Peter's saying to them, it's all changed. You are all chosen people, chosen to tell others of the night and day difference that Jesus has made in your life. And we don't meet all those criteria that were on the list. And do you know why you don't meet the criteria on the list? Because the list has been destroyed. That's why you meet the criteria. It's been destroyed. There isn't a list anymore. It's been destroyed. There's a totally new way. There's a verse in Ephesians a guy named Paul wrote, and he's writing to some people in a place called Ephesus. It's the early church in Ephesus. You could visit Ephesus today. You could see the places where Paul visited and where he spoke and traveled. And he says this in Ephesians 2. It says, because of Jesus' death, You who were once far off have been brought near. Therefore, you are no longer foreigners or strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of the household. You're in on the family. You're part of the family. Because of what Jesus has done, he has brought all of those who are far away and he's brought them home. All of those who might have felt as outsiders are now included as insiders. He changed the way everything was done. Now, I don't know your story. Maybe your experience of church or followers of Jesus has felt more like you were an outsider. Maybe it felt more like going to a sacred place where special people required specific performances from you. And I'm sorry if you've had that experience. I'm sorry if you've been made to feel like that. That's not the way it's supposed to be done anymore. I'm sorry if you felt like you had to do more or somehow were never quite good enough. I'm sorry. That's not the way we measure people anymore. That's not the way we're supposed to be. We believe the message of good news is for all. And our story is that Jesus has changed our lives. He's changed everything. And because of him, we now view the world and others differently. Following Jesus gives us a brand new way of living and loving. See, we were once outsiders and strangers too, but Jesus made a night and day difference in our lives. And wherever you're joining us from today, God can meet with you too. And here at New Life, we want to do everything we can to reach everyone we can. We want to journey with you. We want to answer questions, walk with you, talk with you. We want to share life as we learn what it means to follow Jesus. And if you're watching this live, you can put a comment in the live chat. If you'd like someone to pray with you, if you'd like someone to get in touch with you, you can put a comment in the chat and someone will contact you and explain to you how to be able to privately connect with us. Please do so. Put something in the chat. We've got people ready and waiting to respond. No, we also run an Alpha course. If you've never heard of Alpha, Alpha is just a safe place where you can ask questions and learn more about what it means to follow Jesus. Because this is the wonderful thing about what Jesus has done. See, religion makes you comply through fear. Jesus invites you out of relationship. You're invited to participate, invited to discover, invited to see more what Jesus is like. You're never forced to comply. You're not forced to follow. You're invited and challenged, but it's an invitation and it's open for all to. Now, if you're watching this on demand, you can also contact us at our website. It's nocletchworth.co.uk. You can get in touch with us through the website, and we'd love to journey with you wherever you are. Wherever you are geographically right now, or wherever you are in your faith journey, we invite you to participate with us. And as we come to a close this morning, we're going to sing a song of worship. And these words in this song, they talk about what Jesus has done for us. They speak of what Jesus has done for you. And he welcomes you. He calls you. He chooses you. He sets you free. Jesus loves you so much. He gave his life for you. His life is a once and for all gift. You don't have to approach God with fear. He's made the way wide open for all. And you're not forced to comply. You're simply invited to participate. Maybe this is the first time that you've ever heard people talk about Jesus in this way. Or first time you've heard what Jesus has done for you. Or maybe for whatever reason, you had heard this stuff when you were younger. But something happened in your life to just sort of, knock the edge off. Or just for whatever reason, you've drifted, you've walked away. And maybe you're in that process where you're slowly making your way back. And I understand trust takes time. And however long it takes, we'd like to walk with you. As we worship together, I pray that you would know a sense of God's presence. Right now, wherever you are, Jesus has made a way for you and invites you to meet with him. Let's worship together now.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you, music team. It can be difficult to find moments of peace, calm and quiet in today's busy life. There's so many things to try and juggle and keep on top of, whether it's email, social media, friendships, family relationships, work, leisure time, house jobs. There's just so many things to try and fit in to a week, especially at the moment. But right now, we just have a chance in this moment to be still. A moment to reflect. So I just encourage you, whatever you're doing right now, just to try and pause, if you possibly can, to pause and to be in this moment. There's a story in the Bible when God speaks to somebody called Elijah, and it describes the way God speaks to him with a still, small voice. I believe God wants to speak to each one of us this morning. That still, small voice might be something you just hear in your mind, in your head. It might be a nudge in your soul or a pull on your heart. But just be mindful of God speaking to you now. Joel shared that before the life of Jesus, people had to go to a specific place, and they had to use specific people, and they had to approach God in a specific way at a specific time. But now, the good news is that Jesus can live inside each one of us by his Spirit. There's this guy called Paul. He used to be called Saul, and he hated the church and Christianity, and he did everything he could to destroy it, until he heard the still small voice of God that turned his life upside down. And he wrote a number of letters to churches that he helped to start, and they're recorded in the second half of the Bible called the New Testament. And I just want to read a piece from one of these letters that you can find in the Bible if you look it up in the book of Colossians chapter 1 verse 21 to 23. I'm going to read from the Message translation. And as I read these words, just try and find that moment of quiet and still. This is what he wrote. You yourselves are a case study of what he, that's Jesus, does. At one time, you all had your backs turned to God, thinking rebellious thoughts of him, giving him trouble every chance you got. But now, by giving himself completely at the cross, actually dying for you, Christ brought you over to God's side and put your lives together, whole and holy in his presence. You don't walk away from a gift like that. You stay grounded and steady in that bond of trust, constantly tuned in to the message, careful not to be distracted or diverted. There is no other message, just this one. Every creature under heaven gets this same message. I pray that today, tomorrow, and this coming week, you would know, you would have this revelation of this gift. There's some great ways to respond to this further now. I just wanted to highlight again the Alpha course, which started this week, and the next session will be on Thursday. I just really encourage you to get along. It's not too late to join this course. It's such a brilliant way to explore wherever you are on your journey of faith. And I pray again that through that you would hear that still small voice of God speaking to you. Another great way to connect is to meet, at least virtually, face to face after the live stream on Zoom in the foyer. The details for that should be coming up shortly, and we'll also have them on the end for a little while after the live stream has finished. Elaine's going to be hosting this morning, and I know that she's really looking forward to connecting and greeting you. So just really encourage you to join in with that as we close. I hope you have a fantastic week, that you stay safe and well, that if you're able to get outside and enjoy the improved weather, but more than that, that you would make and find moments to be still, to be quiet, and in those moments that you would start to hear that still small voice of God. And we'll love to see you again next Sunday at 10:20 for our next live stream. And bring your questions, bring your exploration, bring your searching, because God wants to speak to you. All right, well, take care, and we hope to see you again next Sunday.